is that a smart approach to improving QA? And that's what will be the topic of interest for the next 30 minutes. As you all know, this is not pedagogic. It is an interesting set of thoughts that we are trying to outline. So what I would like to share today and think of, share some of the thoughts are structured into 4 parts. What does any improvement involve? And of course, since the context is QA, we'll talk about QA improvement and we'll dissect what QA improvement is all about and what it could take. And put a certain bit of a formal way of thinking about it. And then we'll kind of look at it from what does it take to accomplish this? And that's this part 3, which is about improving assurance. And we'll talk about a bit of what could be some of the goals when we talk about improvement. What does it really mean? Now, I must confess that the inspiration for this topic is a variety of different conversations that I normally have with senior engineering folks, CTOs, engineering managers, VPs, etc., where they are looking at improving the overall system. And one of the elements that they are of interest is obviously QA. Assurance at large. So not necessarily system test, but assurance at large. And what I observe reasonably commonly across a wide spectrum of very smart people is they seem to be jumping into the act of doing, and more often thinking the technology is the savior, and therefore automation, tooling, technology will solve all the problems, and it will necessarily help us to do more. Now, I beg to differ a little bit, and I look at it from improvement is about simplifying. It is about figuring out how to do less. It is therefore about doing less and accomplishing more. And therefore, jumping headlong into activities because it's interesting, especially when you've got new technologies. It may be fun for the individual, but the question is it valuable for the organization? So keeping that in mind, I look at improvements in multiple angles with different kinds of outcomes. And what I want to share with is some of these discussions that we've had and what I have felt should probably be a better way of doing things rather than, and understanding the role of variety of different things like people, process, technology, tools, and so on. Where do they all fit in? And that is the inspiration for this particular discussion today, musing today. So let's start with a very simple notion of saying, what does any improvement involve? We can attach it to QA improvement too. We do a variety of activities. It produces certain outcomes. We understand the relationship that activities produce outcomes. And then we talk about improvement. Maybe it's a QA activity producing great products. Right? It is really about, when we say improvement, it is really about doing activities that significantly better to deliver enhanced outcomes. So we want to better the activities that we do so that we can have outcomes which are significantly enhanced. That's really what, in a large sense, improvement is. So it has two really parts: activities on one side, outcomes on the other side. So now, should we jump along? If I start dissecting a little bit, the question is, should I just jump along? I seem to have an idea. I know that maybe I should automate. Maybe I should have a better process. Maybe I should invent more stronger templates. Maybe I should have some checklists. All these are activities. And lots of time I've seen the people kind of jump headlong and they say, oh, I think I know what to do. And therefore, question therefore is, should we jump into a flurry of activities to improve? Like what I just mentioned, could be automation as an example. Could be, improving early stage tests, or requirements writing as an example, whatever you may consider. Or should we set up outcomes and figure out, therefore, the activities to improve? So should I have a goal? Should I be, should I be a little formal about it? Should I really know this is what I want to accomplish in a certain time frame within a certain budget? Could be, for example, speeding up the release by X%, so that I can probably do 3 releases in a year instead of 2 releases in a year if I'm a product company, right? Like that, there could be many, many outcomes. So the question that I'm trying to ask and grapple is, should I jump headlong because it's fun? Or should I sit back a little bit and think about outcomes? And how do I go forward? I'm quite sure you will naturally say, hey, don't jump along, do think clearly. Now, when I say think clearly, I want to have a certain meaningful formalism, right? And that's kind of important to understand. And that's what we're going to talk about. So let's dwell upon a little more and dissect it a little more deeply. When we say activities, what do we mean? It is actions, activities, done by whom? Me as a part of the team. Maybe I'm an analyst, maybe I'm a product manager, maybe I'm a product owner, maybe I'm a developer, maybe I'm a QA, whoever. Maybe a build and release person. Is it the individual activities? Are we bettering our individual activities we as individuals do? Second, it could be, are we improving our collective activities that we as a team does? You are designing and developing, and I am probably validating, and we put together a team, and therefore this set of people end up doing a particular release. Or, there is an analyst or a product owner who comes up with some interesting ideas which are futuristic, and the developer says, let me do a little prototype and figure out feasibility. And therefore, they as a collective are responsible for doing that. So are we talking about activities improvement in a collective fashion? Or are we really talking about in the way we do those activities? With aids, could be paper aids, could be technology aids, could be tools. Are we looking at it from the way we do it, not the activities per se? And what that primarily turns out to be is, the first one is really about improving personal practices. Me as an individual, hopefully I bettered the way I do things in terms of activities, and therefore I'm contributing to the overall improvement. Is that important? Yes, probably. But then the collective set of activities that we both, as a collective, we accomplish, which is truly an organizational process. It's more like an organizational level, more often, said as a process. They are also activities, right? I doing something, you doing something, we collectively, therefore accomplishing something. Should we improve that? Yeah, seems to be. So what should I do? Maybe I have to improve the overall process aspect. Or if it's the way we do it, maybe we use a variety of tools and technology to accomplish it, in addition to my intelligence and human effort. And that's the third thing. So in a nutshell, we're talking about the fact that, any improvement activities can be viewed in from an individual, collective, or the way we do, and therefore it is practice or process or tools. That's, in a way, the first part of the analysis. The second part of this, when it comes to outcomes, you're really asking, okay, outcomes, I need improvement in outcomes. After all, we said QA improvement is doing activities significantly better. So what outcomes? Is it my individual outcomes? I produce better code individually. My test cases are better. My scripts are better. Whatever. My requirements are better. And therefore, it's individual outcome. Or is it a project outcome? I am good individually, you're good individually, or somebody is not as good individually. And therefore, as a collective, does the project improve? Are we able to produce a cleaner piece of code? Are we able to release it much faster? Are we able to handle more changes quickly? Are we able to make decisions in terms of changes more rapidly? All these are project outcomes, which relate to the deployment of the project, so to speak. And finally, you say, okay, I am good. The project seems to be better. Now, how the heck does it improve my business? Does it enhance my revenue? Does it cut down my cost? And that's what I would worry about as from a business standpoint. I would think of how does it impact my top line and how does it impact my bottom line? It could be because it's cool. Maybe the product is now accepted by a lot more people and therefore the business is expanding. That leads to the notion of revenue, right? Or the product doesn't work well in certain situations of high load and therefore causes grief, and therefore we are losing business in certain seasons, and because of that we're losing market share. Could be the negative downside of certain stuff. So we're really asking about saying, what kind of outcomes are you looking for? Individual outcomes, project-related outcomes, business-related outcomes? And the answer I'm quite sure you will say is, hey, all three. That's lovely. That's exactly what we need to be thinking. We need to be thinking that they're all terribly interlinked in terms of individual outcomes should have a benefit, meaningful benefit to the project, which ultimately should have a benefit to the company. Because if the company doesn't do well, the projects and the individuals don't really exist. And when we talk about outcomes, remember, we are ultimately talking about outcomes to satisfy certain key attributes. What are these attributes? We are looking at it from saying, hey, outcomes need to be consistent. That means when I do something and I do something 6 months later, I want to have a certain meaningful degree of consistency. That means at least it should not go down to deliver what I did before and hopefully better, but then it cannot go down. It can be variant, right? Because we want certainty. We want it to be effective. We want it to be efficient. So what are we saying? We want a certain order and a discipline via consistency. We need to be able to do good work with the attribute of effectiveness and efficiency. And when things don't go well, I need to have a good insight via good visibility, which is measures, metrics, and so on, so that I know that, it is slipping, it is not doing well, it is overdoing something, it is underdoing something. And therefore, I can take rapid corrective actions, which is what is agility all about. So we're talking about the discipline on one side that we want to see as an outcome constantly from all the activities that we do. We want to see good work being done in effective and efficient. We want to know that if something is not going according to plan, know it quickly and respond to it quickly. And finally, we want to be able to handle more work because obviously with time, work only becomes more interesting and more larger. And therefore, how can I scale? How can I handle capacity? Meaning, how do I, with the same capacity, handle more work? It becomes an imperative. And so it's important to keep in mind that the activities produce outcomes, but what we're really trying to do is to ensure these attributes are satisfied, right? And not satisfied are met. So let's go back to the picture we started off with in terms of activity. We said, look, there are activities that are individual, organizational, and the way we do it, and that's why we talked about the practice, process, and tools. Let's dig in a little deeper and understand what are we trying to do when we talk about an improvement, right? We are talking about it from improvements to the process, improvements to the practice, improvements to the tools. And process is only about focus to a large degree on consistency. It has a bearing on effectiveness and scalability and so on and so forth. But it's one of the key things is to have a certain degree of well-understood consistency. But what is important to understand is anything that we do in any of these are not independent. They're very intertwined. And we'll talk about it in the closing time as to what do we mean by intertwined. So you can't just say, I'm going to improve by adopting new tool set and lo behold, I have life improvement. It's probably not going to occur that way. You can't neither say, I'm going to do some great process improvement and magic will happen. That also is not. It needs all these things to happen in a meaningful fashion such that you accomplish your outcomes, right? And that's what we're trying to dwell upon as smart QA improvement. So when we talk about a process, the whole idea is we are trying to, in some sense, enforce the discipline, certain basic discipline across the organizations via various things like roles, responsibilities, activities, criteria, measures, aids. All these are part of the process term. And do remember, no organization has no process or no practice or no tools. We all have something. We are looking at a delta in terms of improvement as we go forward. So you're looking at, can we readjust the roles? Can we reorder or improve certain activities that we collectively do? Is there some criteria that we can readjust? Shall we measure something differently or add something to the? That's exactly what we do. Can we invent certain checklists and certain templates for certain jobs to make the job more meaningful and so on? The second part is from the practice part, which is really about personal tools. And the personal tools are things that help me do my job better. That means I can think better, I can do well. And they normally run into the realm of saying the mindsets that one possesses, the habits that one has, the techniques and principles and heuristics that one uses to do the individual activities. And that is where methods, methodologies, techniques, all those things come into picture. And those are, think of it as personal tools, right? And these personal tools can be aided with external tools, which could be paper tools or more often software tools. So tools are really about how do I help in doing the activities related to the individual, the personal doing, and the collective activities, which is the organizational, and definitely manage the collective actions, right? So therefore, some tools will be in terms of doing tools. They help you to do. Maybe your standard automation tool that we end up is more of an example of a doing tool. Some tools will be assisting. They help you to configure, set up, track, Some tools are more analytical. They help you come up with charts. They help you show some stuff. They analyze code. They analyze bug reports, whatever. And today, of course, the tools are intelligent because they also had a dose of AI injected to them. Some tools are controlling oriented. They don't allow you to do some things because you have not done these. And some tools are more in terms of communicating, where you see dashboards and reports, all this stuff. So all those tools work across the entire life cycle of the delivery, development, and the product life cycle, right? And now do not forget, all these are intertwined. So which means you have to keep that interesting balance of where do I adjust, what do I need to enhance, what do I need to fix across these three elements of process, tools, and practice. And when I say fix or improve, it's not like saying that everything is broken. We're trying to say, okay, there is a bigger need. There's the ground realities have shifted. There is more important outcomes to be accomplished. So we need to shift. That's really what it is. So when we talk about insurance, this is what we're really talking about, right? We're talking about assurance as in terms of, well, I have current activities, I have current outcomes. So what's important to understand is, okay, what is the current? Construct a baseline. So I need to do some assessment. So before I embark upon any formal improvement cycle, which is non-trivial, I need to have some amount of effort and time to do, to do a bit of a diagnostic to know what kind of activities am I doing, how good are they, what kind of outcomes do they produce, how good are they, what is good, what is to be improved, what is fundamentally missing, and therefore work on what activities to keep, what activities to adjust, what activities to drop. And remember, they cut across the activities I do as an individual, activities we do as a collective, and the way we do these activities. And what we also do next is the yellow bar on top tells you, hey, this is what I want to accomplish. That's my intended outcomes. And therefore, you are surmising that these could be the intended activities. So I need to have some idea of goal. And formalism in terms of a goal of saying, what are the outcomes from a business angle, from a project angle, from an individual angle, right? I need to have some formalism in terms of saying, let me now discern those. And then what are the activities that I need to change? And then you ask yourself, okay, activities of what? That is related to maybe the process, some of them activities related to the practice, or some of the activities that needs to be enhanced with tools, because the way we do has to change. It is not the activity themselves, because maybe the activity is too slow or too time consuming or too difficult or too error prone. And therefore we need to change the way it does. And that is where tools come into picture. And so what we're really doing here is to say, look, I need to have a baseline. So I need to do a diagnostic. I need to have a goal in terms of activities and outcomes, start with the outcomes, then work on the activities. And therefore you have a sense of a gap, a little more formal way of trying to figure out a gap. And therefore, now you understand and ask yourself, okay, this gap relates to what? Is it to the individual activities? Then I have to change and improve. I wouldn't say change, improve the practice. And then I say, maybe I have to build in better habits, or maybe I have to build better, come up with new techniques, or, I need to have more stronger heuristics in place. And so on and so forth. Or you might say, look, I think our overall process, when we work together, we are individually good, but that's collectively broken. So we need a more stronger gating criteria. Maybe we need a shift in the roles and responsibilities. All that is related to the process. I think we already talked about the tools. So we're kind of finding the gap between what is there in terms of intended outcomes, what is therefore the gap between the activities, and then allocating those activities to these three things, and then formulating a plan which you might say, I will do this as milestone 1 in the next few weeks or months, and then subsequently in phase 2 or milestone 2, I will deliver this, and you will structure it into a very well-formed improvement plan. But that's more like a project plan for improvement. Anything less formal in terms of what we do would probably not give us long-term effects. It may give us temporary improvement effects, but then it's like the yearly goal of, beginning of the year, you sign up into the gym, you are wonderful for the first few weeks, and after that you drop off. And the gym owner benefits because you paid the full year fee, right? But what we want is a certain degree of consistency, and consistency is the hardest part in everything. And more often, if you come from a physical exercise and any of these kinds of stuff, you understand it is just doing some things on a very repeated, continual fashion and being consistent is what ultimately makes improvement happen. It's not any more greater magic. And to be able to do that, you need to be able to embed this consistency, so to speak, at an individual level as mindsets, and more importantly habits, and of course at an organizational context as a process, and enable it with appropriate tools to make that possible. So that's the how-to part in terms of an assurance as part 1. To look at it, the key idea here is, do you know the baseline of where you are? Do you know what you're trying to get into? Do you understand the formalism? Can you decompose it into the intended outcomes and the gap therefore into the notion of business outcomes, project outcomes, individual outcomes? And here on the activity side, can you correlate that with process activity improvement, practice activity improvement, and the way we do things in terms of tools? Now, having set the context in terms of saying, okay, this is how you break down the activities and into these 3 elements and so on, and look at these attributes and then understand the intertwining piece, let's dwell upon the notion of intertwining. What do I really mean by saying intertwining of process? There was a very interesting discussion that I recently had with a very senior gentleman. And in the process, he was saying, hey, just focus on tools and automation. He was right, because he knew what the problem was. And he said, look, we have processes, we have certain things already in place, so I don't think that's important. And what we were trying to impress upon him, especially I was trying to impress upon him, was the fact that, look, we don't have any disagreement on tools as a significant player in the modern technology of development today, in any improvement cycle. But then the fact of the matter is, the tool is basically an activity that is done by a machine, and there is an interlinkage. That means your personal activity or your process-related activity, a collective activity, has been taken over by somebody else in terms of a tool, and it is hopefully doing a faster and a better job, which is fantastic. But then the fact of the matter is, are those activities well designed to get the benefit of that? And that is where the intertwining happens. So let me show you a little example illustrated to the picture. There are many, many stakeholders, as we know. Maybe there is a QA person, there's a developer, there's a product owner, maybe represented by different colors in the heads on the left side, and each of them done various activities. So these little horizontal lines represent the individual activities done by that, the stakeholder. And I've just kind of circled it with, with a colored dotted line, just to indicate the series of activities done by that particular role. And they're all composed in some order so that you have some outcomes. You release, you test, whatever, right? You do a prototype, you freeze something. So, but these activities done by individuals are not in isolation, which you and I know, right? So what I do maybe as an analyst, and I'm changing something. I want maybe an improved UI, for example. So we go and say, this requirement is going to change because you're going to add more information. Now, what is it kind of implying? It means that, the automation scripts that I might have could break simply because you didn't understand that your changing of some of the elements of the requirement actually breaks. And if I'm not clearly aware, or if that is a lot that to be done and I don't have that kind of time, then those automation pieces that I've already invested in would break, meaning I wouldn't be able to use it. And therefore, there is a linkage here, right? And there's a linkage between this and this in terms of the decision that you take here could affect something here. Or I am doing some testing here and I find that something is not well done earlier. So because of the, or I find that, I could have done much better if you had incorporated some notions of testability, for example. And therefore, there's a linkage. So I'm just showing you arrows to show you backward, forward linkages that exist between variety of different activities from different stakeholders. And I'm kind of showing you this porous kind of a filter or a sieve to indicate certain gates. So I do a lousy job of programming and I pass on all the bugs to you and you're suffering to find my issues, which I should have found. Or maybe the requirement is so weak and loose and we have done a lot of reviews. So obviously, it's seeping in and somebody else is constructing it and taking it. And, these are all some examples of saying that the gating criteria is weak. So the idea here is to, with this picture, demonstrate the notion of linkage between stuff and then kind of show you that, hey, it is affected by maybe poor change management. And that's like a linkage between process and practice. Or effectiveness is affected by poor gating criteria, maybe again a process and practice. Or is efficiency is affected by continuously changing moving parts, which means I'm modifying UIs or modifying parameters or modifying interfaces, and therefore it affects the practice because my tools and practice are getting affected, and so on. So that just to illustrate the idea, that's a very strong intertwining that is in place, and that is important to understand. Probably I'll take another about 3-4 minutes, a little more after 12:30, and probably in the last couple of slides. So to kind of close down and wrap it up and kind of tell you what could be some example of goals at a higher level. When we talk about organizational improvement, it could be at a business level. So we're saying I want outcomes. It's not about just saying I want more automation, I want more scripting, I want more coverage. Yeah, those are all at the lower X level. But the first level, it's really about, am I reducing cost of quality? Am I improving the efficiencies? Am I enhancing capacity utilization? Am I improving decision making or better risk taking? Am I reducing the overall dev cycle? And how does it have a bearing to the revenue and the cost or profitability? Whereas when you talk about a project aspect, you're talking about better early stage code with unit tests and requirements and spec, or higher coverage and lower escapes and so on and so forth. Right? All these are project related goals. When you talk about individual related goals, we're looking at higher stage, higher quality of work, better capability individually, more consistency at individual level. And those are all individual capabilities. And unless we have a very clear idea of all these three, then we will be very skewed. We will just focus on one, not knowing that they are all again interconnected. Because what I do has a bearing to the project, which has a bearing to the organization. So there's also a bit of an intertwining in terms of outcomes, not only in the process. So to kind of wrap this up and look at it as one picture, which I will construct in the next couple of slides, is to say when you talk about an improvement from the notion of smarter ways of looking at improvement, first you're really saying, do you know your baseline in terms of business and project and capability? When I say capability, I mean individual. Do a diagnostic, please. Right? And have to have some kind of a formal diagnostic to look at various elements of the project. Maybe you talk to people, maybe you look at assets, you audit some stuff, whatever means. But all you're trying to do is to do an assess or diagnose, to identify what is your current baseline in terms of activities related to business, project, and capability. What are you today? And then you're really asking, what do you want to do tomorrow? So what is it that you want to do in terms of goals, as in terms of organizational outcomes, project-related outcomes, individual capabilities and outcomes? And that's just so, and hopefully there is a certain amount of gap. So you fix the goals first, right? And now you're saying, okay, what do I really want to improve? What outcomes am I seeking? So it's not only fixing goals, but also you're kind of being clear of outcomes. Oh, yeah, we probably would be better off if we could organize this better, be more disciplined here. Or, I wish we could respond much faster. So I'm trying to figure out how can I improve agility or how to improve efficiency, which is speed. All these are outcomes. So fix the goals, make clear outcomes. And finally, then figure out the activities to do related to process, related to practice, related to tooling. And remember, here we're only doing delta. It's only improvement. It's not that it's not there. Unless you're a very, very early stage kind of a organization, in which case some of these things won't really apply because you're very early stage. So you're looking at only delta. There's no such thing as this is not there. You're only trying to find out what should I change, which could be add, modify, delete in terms of activities related to process, practice, and tooling. So thank you.